I gave him my last $8,400 and every piece of my soul. He took it all, built an empire, then erased me like I never existed. This is the story of how I lost everything to the man I loved, and how I fought to get myself back. I sat alone on the cold concrete floor of my workshop, surrounded by broken chains, twisted silver scraps, and half-finished pieces that would never see the light of day. Rain hammered against the metal roof like it wanted to break in and finish what life had started. My hands trembled as I stared at the scattered fragments, remnants of everything I once believed in. A single tear slipped down my cheek and landed on a dull copper leaf I had poured my soul into 3 years ago. That was the moment I realized I had nothing left. This is the story of how I gave away the last $8,400 I had in this world to a man who promised we would build something beautiful together, and how that single decision almost destroyed me, but eventually taught me the most expensive lesson of my life. It was a small craft fair on the outskirts of the city, one of those quiet weekend events where dreamers still dared to hope. The air smelled of wet grass and fresh coffee. I was packing up my modest booth after another disappointing day when he walked up. Kael Draven, tall, with sharp eyes that seemed to see straight through every design I had laid out. He picked up one of my signature pieces, a delicate silver fern pendant inspired by the forest after rain, and turned it slowly in his fingers like he was reading its soul. "You made this?" he asked, his voice low and certain. I nodded, suddenly self-conscious about the calluses on my hands and the faint stain of patina on my sleeve. He didn't smile right away. Instead, he looked at me like he had been searching for something for a very long time and had finally found it. We talked until the vendors started closing their tents. He told me about his vision, a luxury jewelry brand rooted in sustainability, pieces that told stories of nature and resilience. He had the connections, the ambition, the fire. But he lacked the one thing I had in abundance: real, tangible designs born from years of working with my hands. That night, the rain came down hard. I remember sitting in my tiny rented workshop, the only light coming from a single hanging bulb that flickered like it was about to give up too. On the table in front of me was an old coffee can where I kept my emergency savings. $8,400. 3 years of skipping meals, working double shifts at the craft supply store, and saying no to every small joy that cost money. I stared at my phone for what felt like forever. My thumb hovered over the transfer button. Ramona's voice echoed in my head, my mother's tired, bitter warning from our last phone call. "That boy's eyes are too hungry, Xael. Men like him don't build with you. They build on you." Elowen had been gentler but no less direct. My older sister had looked at me with those quiet, worried eyes and said, "You always give everything, little sister. One day there'll be nothing left of you to give." I closed my eyes. I could still hear Kael's words from earlier that evening, spoken with such quiet conviction under the dripping awning. "Xael, if you believe in this the way I do, we won't just make jewelry. We'll create something that matters, something that lasts. We'll do this together. Together." That word felt warm in a life that had been cold for so long. My finger pressed send. The moment the money left my account, a strange peace washed over me, followed immediately by a wave of terror so deep it made my stomach twist. There was no contract, no signature, no safety net, just a promise between two tired dreamers in the rain. I remember whispering into the empty workshop, "Please, don't make me regret this." But deep down I already knew. Some risks don't ask for permission. They simply take everything you have and dare you to survive what comes next. And that night, with the rain still falling and my savings gone, I chose to believe in him anyway. Those first few months after I sent the money felt like stepping into a dream I didn't want to wake from. Kael and I worked side by side in that tiny rented workshop. The air always smelled of solder and wet stone. He would pace while talking about vision and scale, and I would sit at my bench, fingers moving carefully over silver and recycled gold, turning his big ideas into something people could actually touch and wear. Slowly, without either of us saying it out loud, I became the quiet engine behind Lumina Atelier. I designed almost every piece in our first 2 collections. Delicate fern earrings that caught the light like morning dew. A cascading necklace inspired by river stones smoothed by years of water. Each one carried my hands, my late nights, my quiet belief that we were building something honest. While Kael met with potential investors and spoke at sustainability events, I stayed behind. I negotiated with recycled metal suppliers until my voice grew hoarse. I learned how to stretch every dollar. And when cash flow grew tight, I took out the first bank loan in my own name. I told myself it was temporary, That love sometimes looked like carrying more than your share so the other person could fly. The days blurred into one long rhythm of exhaustion. 16 hours became normal. I would wake before sunrise, work until my eyes burned, then fall asleep on the old couch in the corner of the workshop with metal dust still on my clothes. My shoulders ached constantly. My hands developed new calluses on top of old ones. But every time a new order came in, or when Kael sent me a photo of someone wearing our pieces at a gallery opening, a strange, stubborn happiness would bloom in my chest. This was ours. We were doing it together. Marcus Reed was the only one who saw the truth clearly. He had been my friend and fellow metalsmith for years, long before Kael ever appeared. One rainy Thursday night, while we were both bent over the polishing wheel past midnight, he set his tools down and looked at me with tired, honest eyes. "Xael, you're disappearing into this. He's out there collecting the applause, and you're here paying the price. Be careful." I smiled weakly and told him I was fine, that Kael appreciated everything, that we had an understanding. Marcus didn't argue. He simply stayed. He helped me finish urgent orders when my hands shook from fatigue, brought coffee without being asked, and never once made me feel small for my choices. Leela, my younger sister, started showing up unannounced too. She would slip into the workshop after her shift at the cafe, carrying warm soup in old containers or fresh bread from the bakery down the street. She never said much at first. She would just sit on the stool beside me, watching me work, until I finally let the words spill out. The fear that I was falling behind in my own life. The quiet worry that Kael's eyes no longer lingered on me the way they used to. She listened without judgment. Sometimes she would squeeze my shoulder and whisper, "You don't have to carry the whole world alone, sis." As the months turned into years, Lumina Atelier began to rise. Our pieces appeared in small boutique windows in the city, then bigger ones. Fashion blogs started mentioning the brand. Kael's face appeared in interviews about sustainable luxury. He looked confident, polished, like a man who had always belonged in that world. I watched him change from a distance. The way he dressed became sharper. His laugh came easier when he was around important people. He still kissed me when he came back to the workshop late at night, but the kisses felt shorter, distracted, like his mind was already somewhere else. I told myself it was the pressure of success, that once things stabilized, we would find our way back to each other. But deep down, a small, cold fear had started growing. Because while I was still waking up with metal shavings in my hair and debt notices in my mailbox, Kael was beginning to look at our little workshop like it was something he had already outgrown. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the man I had given everything to was slowly learning how to shine without me. The nights grew longer, my body grew weaker. Yet every time I looked at the growing collection of our pieces, shining under the workshop lights, I still believed we were building something real, something that would last. I just didn't know yet that I was becoming the shadow behind the light. Success arrived faster than either of us had dared to imagine. Lumina Atelier suddenly had contracts with 3 prestigious boutiques in the city. Magazine features appeared almost overnight. The phone rang constantly with interview requests and inquiries from serious buyers. Kael was everywhere, smiling in photos, speaking confidently on panels about ethical luxury, shaking hands with people whose names once only appeared in glossy magazines. I watched it all from the workshop. My hands never stopped moving, but something inside me had begun to tighten, slow and painful, like a wire being pulled too far. He started coming back later each night. At first, he still texted, short messages saying he was stuck in meetings or networking drinks. Then even the texts grew sparse. I told myself it was temporary, that the whirlwind of success demanded his time. But I couldn't ignore how his eyes avoided mine when he finally walked through the door, how his voice carried a new polished distance. Then came Vesper Quill. I saw her name first in a society post online. Elegant, poised, daughter of a powerful family deeply rooted in the luxury world. Kael mentioned her casually at first. She has incredible connections, could open doors we never dreamed of. Later, the photos started appearing. Kael and Vesper at gallery openings. Kael and Vesper at private dinners. Always smiling, always looking like they belonged together in that bright, effortless world. I felt the shift in my bones before my mind could fully accept it. The man who once sat on the dirty workshop floor with me, eating cold pizza at 2 a.m., now seemed embarrassed by the very place that had given birth to his brand. He no longer introduced me as his partner. When someone asked about the designer behind the pieces, he would smile tightly and say the work was a team effort. A team effort. The words tasted like rust in my mouth. The final blow came during what he called a strategy alignment meeting at the new downtown studio they had just leased. I arrived early, still wearing my worn apron, my fingers stained with the patina I had been working with all morning. The room was filled with sleek furniture and people in tailored clothes. Kael stood at the head of the long table, looking every inch the successful founder. When the discussion turned to brand narrative and future collections, he cleared his throat and spoke with calm finality. Moving forward, we need to reposition Lumina Atelier. The story of the small workshop is charming, but it no longer serves the brand. Xael has provided valuable support in the early days, of course, but she is not a founding member. All core designs originated from my vision. We'll be updating the website, catalogs, and credits accordingly. The brand needs a more professional image now. The room went quiet. I sat there frozen as if the floor had opened beneath me. Every late night, every loan taken in my name, every design I had poured my heart into, suddenly reduced to valuable support. I waited for him to look at me, to at least acknowledge the woman sitting right there who had given him everything. He never did. After the meeting ended, I walked back to the old workshop alone. The rain had started again, soft and steady, like it remembered the night I had given him my last savings. I pushed open the creaking door and stood in the dim light. My hands moved on their own, reaching into the small, locked drawer where I kept the very first piece I ever designed for Lumina, a simple silver fern pendant on a delicate chain. The one I had shown him at that rainy craft fair years ago. I held it in my palm, feeling its familiar weight. The metal was cool against my skin. Memories flooded in without permission, his voice saying, "We'll do this together." The way his eyes had lit up when I first showed him the finished collection. The quiet promise I had believed with my whole exhausted heart. Now that promise lay shattered at my feet. I wasn't just being pushed aside, I was being erased. Completely. The pain rose so sharply I had to grip the edge of the workbench to stay upright. Tears came then, hot and silent, blurring the workshop I had loved so fiercely. In that moment, something deep inside me cracked open and changed forever. The woman who had once given everything without asking for a single signature was gone. And in her place stood someone who finally understood the brutal cost of blind trust. I closed my fist around the fern pendant until the edges pressed painfully into my skin. This time I didn't whisper a prayer. I made a silent vow instead. Whatever came next, I would never let anyone erase me again. I didn't scream. I didn't cry in front of him. I didn't even slam the door when I left the new studio that day. Instead, I walked back to the old workshop in silence, the fern pendant still clutched tightly in my fist. Something inside me had shifted. The pain was still there, raw and bleeding, but it had hardened into something quieter, sharper, a quiet storm that refused to break loudly. That night, I sat at my workbench under the same flickering bulb and made the first real decision of my new life. I would not let him erase me without a fight. The next morning, I called Thalia Rune. She was a sharp-eyed lawyer who specialized in creative ownership and intellectual property disputes. We met in a small cafe near the river. I slid a folder across the table with trembling hands. Old emails, time-stamped design files, text messages where Kael had once praised my ideas with genuine excitement. Thalia listened without interruption, her expression calm but focused. When I finished speaking, she looked at me for a long moment and said softly, "You're not the first woman who built something beautiful only to be written out of its story. But you might be one of the few who decides to write herself back in." With her guidance, I began gathering proof the way a careful artisan gathers materials. Slowly, deliberately, and without missing a single detail. Every late-night email where Kael had called my designs brilliant and the heart of Lumina. Every bank statement showing loans taken in my name to keep the workshop running. Every voice recording Marcus had quietly urged me to keep. Short clips of Kael thanking me for pulling all-nighters when deadlines loomed. Marcus came by the workshop more often now. He didn't say "I told you so." He simply rolled up his sleeves, helped me organize digital files, and stayed late into the night, making sure nothing was overlooked. One evening, as we sat surrounded by printed emails and old hard drives, he placed a hand on my shoulder and murmured, "You're stronger than you think, Xael. This hurts like hell, but you're doing it right." Elowyn arrived from the city a week later. My older sister showed up at my door with a small suitcase and that familiar steady gaze. She didn't ask for explanations right away. She simply moved into the tiny apartment above the workshop, made tea in the quiet mornings, and reminded me, again and again, that my worth had never depended on his recognition. "Your name doesn't disappear just because someone tries to delete it," she said one night while we sat on the worn couch. "It lives in every piece you touched, and soon the world will see that." The most unexpected turn came from Vesper Quill herself. I never reached out to her, but rumors travel fast in the luxury world. She began asking quiet questions at industry events, wondering aloud why the designer behind Lumina's most celebrated collections had suddenly vanished from every credit. Her inquiries created small ripples of doubt among investors and boutique owners. I didn't celebrate it. It felt too heavy, too complicated. Every new piece of evidence I uncovered brought a fresh wave of pain. Reading Kael's old messages, the ones where he once called me his secret weapon and promised we were building an empire together, felt like pressing on an open wound. Some nights, I sat on the floor with papers scattered around me, fighting the urge to call him and beg for an explanation I knew would never satisfy. Other nights, a colder, clearer anger settled in my chest. I was no longer the woman who gave everything and asked for nothing. I was becoming someone who would protect what was hers, even if it meant tearing apart the illusion we had built. Each document I saved, each timestamp I verified, carried both heartbreak and power. The fear was still there. Fear of what this fight would cost me. Fear that I might lose even more than I already had. But beneath the fear grew something new, a quiet, burning resolve. I wasn't gathering proof just to win. I was gathering it to remind myself that my hands, my mind, and my heart had created something real. And no one, not even the man I once loved, had the right to steal that truth from me. The storm inside me kept building, silent and steady. I didn't know how it would end. But for the first time in years, I knew I was no longer just surviving, I was preparing. The night of Lumina Atelier's biggest collection launch arrived under the soft glow of gallery lights in the heart of the city. Crystal glasses clinked, cameras flashed. Well-dressed guests moved through the elegant space, admiring the new pieces that bore Kael's name so prominently. I was not inside that gallery. Instead, 3 blocks away in a modest rented loft, I opened my own small exhibition. It was quiet, intimate, just enough light to let the pieces breathe. I called it the Uncredited Hands. On clean white walls hung every original design I had created for Lumina. The fern pendants, the riverstone necklaces, the delicate cascading earrings. Beside each piece was a simple card with the exact date it was designed, time-stamped files, and a short handwritten note about the night I had poured my exhaustion and hope into it. No accusations, no angry words, just the truth laid out in silence. Thalia Rune stood quietly beside me, her presence steady and calm. She had prepared the legal documents with surgical precision, clear claims of intellectual property rights and unjust enrichment. The folder in her hands felt heavy with months of quiet work. I didn't need to raise my voice. The evidence spoke for itself. Across town, inside the Grand Gallery, the atmosphere began to shift. Whispers spread through the crowd as screenshots and stories from my small exhibition started circulating. Vesper Quill arrived fashionably late, but instead of standing proudly beside Kael, she moved through the room with a different energy. Her questions had grown louder in recent weeks. Now standing under the bright lights, she looked at the pieces she had once praised and asked the one question Kael feared most. Who really created these? Her public withdrawal came later that same evening. A quiet but unmistakable step back, followed by a clear demand for transparency from the brand she had once supported. Kael stood frozen near the centerpiece display, surrounded by investors and journalists who suddenly wanted answers he could no longer smoothly provide. For the first time, the polished man who had erased me looked truly exposed. That same night, my mother Ramona surprised me most of all. She appeared at the door of my small exhibition just before closing, her coat damp from the evening mist. She didn't speak at first. She simply walked from piece to piece, reading every note with careful eyes. When she finally reached me, her voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. I was wrong, Xael. I thought your dreams were too soft for this world. I didn't see how strong they actually made you. It was the first time she had ever stood fully on my side. The words didn't heal everything, but they landed gently somewhere deep inside me. Kael never fully collapsed in public. There was no dramatic shouting match or courtroom spectacle for the cameras. Instead, in the weeks that followed, he was forced to confront a simpler, harsher truth. His success had never been built alone. It had rested on the hands, the sleepless nights, and the unwavering belief of the woman he had promised to build a future with. He chose to settle quietly. Not everything was returned, but enough was acknowledged. My name reappeared where it belonged. The loans taken in my name received partial relief, and most importantly, I received something no court could grant: the right to tell my own story without shame. In the end, justice didn't arrive as thunder. It arrived as quiet, undeniable proof and the courage to let silence carry the weight. Months later, I stood in my own new studio. Sunlight streamed through tall windows onto clean workbenches and fresh tools. No more flickering bulbs. No more debt notices taped to the wall. I sat at the center table, carefully shaping a new piece. It was a phoenix rising, delicate wings formed from recycled silver and gold, catching light with quiet strength. My hands moved with a peace I hadn't felt in years. There were still scars, of course. Some nights the old pain returned in soft waves. But I no longer confused love with disappearing. I no longer measured my worth by how much I could carry for someone else. As I finished the final curve of the phoenix wing, a small, genuine smile touched my lips. For the first time in a long time, the future felt like it truly belonged to me. And in that quiet moment, with the warm light on my hands and the city humming softly outside, I understood the deepest truth of all. Sometimes the loudest voice isn't the one that screams. It's the one that finally chooses to speak, clearly, calmly, and without apology, for itself. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless. Aviso legal. Disclaimer: the stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure, but every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audiovisual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.